We're live, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the staff for once again getting us set up to the world technologically. Good morning to all those attending the RTA's virtual meeting of the Board of Directors. Governor Pritzker's emergency declaration amendments to the Open Meetings Act. We continue to operate under permission to conduct our meeting without physical attendance requirements. Ahead of the public, I find it not prudent or practical to hold an in-person meeting or to have staff or any member of the board all together at our headquarters at this meeting. So let's review the guidelines for our meeting today. First, keep your audio on mute as much as possible to minimize background noise, which may impair recording. When you have a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand. The board secretary, Mr. LaMarche, will call on board members who have raised their hands one at a time. Third, when he calls on you, lower your hand and unmute before you begin speaking. When we get to voting, please raise your hand to make a motion or a second. The board secretary will identify who is making the motion and second for the record. And after he announces the motion in a second, please lower your hands. Are there any questions at this time? If not, with that said, I will now call this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority for Northeastern Illinois to order. And I will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. You can keep yourself muted if you would, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. With that, Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Director Indelcio. Director Indelcio.
Here.
Director Canty.
Here.
Director Terry.
Here.
Director Colson.
Here.
Director Fuentes.
Here.
Director Gavin.
Here.
Director Gorman.
Here.
Director Groven.
Here.
Director Holt.
Present.
Director Cotel. Director Lewis.
Present.
Director Melvin.
Present.
Director Pang.
Present.
Director Ross. Director Sager.
Here.
Chairman Dillard.
Present.
15 present and 1 absent.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your great attendance as always. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from a board meeting which we held on September 15th of 2021. Are there any comments or corrections to the minutes?
I see no hands at this time.
Okay, if not, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to ask the board for a motion and a second to approve these minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Got a motion by Director Gorman, a second by Director Indelcio.
Thank you, too. Please remember to always, as we move ahead, we have the hand raising tool, which is great. So for the record, Mr. Secretary, would you please take the roll?
Yeah. Director Indelcio.
Yes.
Director Canty.
Yes.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Yes.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gavin.
Yes.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Cotel.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Melvin.
Yes.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Ross. Director Sager.
Yes.
Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
15 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So the minutes are approved from last month. Item 4 is the public comment segment of the meeting. We've asked the public to submit their comments via electronic mail. Jeremy, were there any comments received from the public to read in?
There were no comments submitted, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 5, which is the Executive Director's report and a discussion on the Federal American Rescue Plan funding. Leanne, good morning. It's yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and our guests that have joined us today. So I want to begin this morning, right at the top, by congratulating Director Saga, who earlier this month became one of the 2 inaugural recipients of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, or CMAP's Visionary Leader Award. For those of you who may have missed it, CMAP issued their first Regional Excellence Awards on October 7th, and Director Saga was recognized for his 32 years of public service to Woodstock and to the region. I'm sure I speak for everyone here when I extend our heartfelt congratulations to you on this very well-deserved recognition. We were also very happy to see the Village of Bedford Park receive CMAP's Partner for Progress Award for the Connect to Work pilot program, in which Cook County, in partnership with the RTA and the Village, have worked together for over a year now to solve the last mile commute challenges for workers and residents in Bedford Park and help them choose transit over driving. So we appreciate CMAP's recognition of this worthy program and the other leaders and the efforts that are building a more inclusive, resilient, and economic competitive region. And one more, and a financial update from last month's meeting. On September 29, the RTA competitively sold $89 million of Series 2021 advanced refunding bonds. We discussed that at the last board meeting. We received 7 bids, resulting in a net present value savings of just over 12.5%, which represents about $11 million. And that exceeded the high end of last month's projection of 12% and 10.4 million in saving estimates. So some good news on that front as well. As noted in the agenda this morning, my report will include a discussion of the Federal American Rescue Plan funding, and I'm going to save that discussion for the end of this report. And then once that concludes, I'll introduce our 2 guest speakers. So next slide, please. So first, a brief legislative update. In Washington, Democratic lawmakers are still negotiating internally on the size and scope of the reconciliation package focused on key Democratic social and climate priorities. As of now, the House hasn't passed the bipartisan infrastructure funding and reauthorization bill that had previously passed the Senate, with the progressives in the House pushing for an agreement on the reconciliation package prior to voting on that infrastructure deal. We'll keep you posted. In Springfield, the Illinois General Assembly is back in session this week and next for the legislature's annual fall veto session. Limited agenda is planned for both the Senate and the House, with much of the focus centered around passing congressional legislative maps. As we told you last month, we're pursuing temporary recovery ratio relief over the next 2 weeks, seeking a 3-year waiver of the recovery ratio requirements while the service boards continue to preserve federal funding for future budget years. As a reminder, the region is going to miss that 50% recovery ratio mandate due to the combination of the higher than expected sales tax revenues, but also because of their continued controlled expenses. Again, sort of that good but bad problem to have, right? We have been in contact with the leadership in the Senate and the House and are currently waiting for the legislation to be filed. We'll provide you with any updates on this legislation's progress. So next slide, please. As a reminder, our annual call for community planning projects is currently open through Friday, October 28. The call is once again being held jointly with CMAP. As with our 2021 call, the priority is being given to applicants from high and very high need communities. Project selection will be completed by the end of this year, followed by a public comment period and a presentation on the program of projects before you in early 22. More information and links to apply are available on both the RTA and CMAP website homepages. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, today's meeting will begin with two guest speakers who I'll introduce in a few moments. We will then hear a regular report on the monthly financial results, followed by several action items, including the adoption of a compliance policy regarding the issuance of tax-exempt bonds, the authorization, I should say, related to employee benefits and a reappointment of a pension trustee. We will set also the 2022 RTA meeting schedule and formally recognize CTA for its recent naming as Outstanding Public Transportation System by the American Public Transit Association. Next slide. Before I provide you an update on the strategic plan, I'd like to initiate a bit of discussion on the American Rescue Plan funding and bring you up to speed as to where we're at with all of that. When the pandemic first struck back in March 2020 and fair revenue, as you all know, was greatly impacted, and our region really benefited from the passage of Federal CARES Act monies, which allowed the service boards to continue to provide service for essential workers and those who need transit most. When the federal government passed the CRISA Act, we were able to direct the funding in the region towards those with most critical transit needs at that time, and to ensure that those who most relied on transit would be able to continue to count on it throughout the pandemic. We have been consistent in stating that the focus of the American Rescue Plan funding should be to provide funding security to the service boards so they can have the opportunity to recover from the pandemic, as well as adapt and transition to a new post-pandemic reality. As you all know, this third tranche of federal funding has yet to be allocated. We had planned since March, when we received it, to allocate it based on the budget submitted by the three service boards for FY22, while reserving a good portion of it was the original intent, to maximize financial flexibility in the future budget years. However, last month, the Federal Transit Administration issued a funding opportunity of $2.2 billion to provide additional relief for transit agencies. And that's $2.2 billion nationwide. A requirement, though, of this opportunity is that qualifying regions demonstrate the allocation of all their federal funding received to date. And the application for this new discretionary or competitive pot of money, the additional 2.2 billion, the applications to the FTA are due on November 8th. So a primary role of the RTA, as you know, is to successfully advocate for the greatest amount of funding possible for our region. And consequently, it is in our region's best interest to allocate all the American Rescue Planning funding prior to this November 8th deadline application, so that our region can be competitive for those additional relief funds. We believe our region can stand to benefit from this funding opportunity, and our responsibility is to ensure that no federal dollars are left on the table. So allocating these monies now also gives us the opportunity to stabilize the service board operating budgets for a number of years, and really remove us from a sort of the emergency funding mode that we have. I sometimes feel like we're just sort of careening from one to the next, but really the emergency funding mode that we have experienced since the beginning of the pandemic. And that will allow us and the service boards to focus on recovery efforts that will continue to be discussed in the strategic plan development process. So related to the rescue fund allocation, we are focusing on 3 key principles to drive that allocation. First, to address any near-term budget shortfalls and ensure that each service board has sufficient funding to close any FY 2022 budget gaps. Our second principle is that each service board has the time and the funding available to continue to run service, attract riders back to the system, and allow the region to strategically plan for operational changes and innovations necessary to serve the evolving transit habits that we are and will continue to experience. And third, and finally, we want to account for the unpredictability of the recovery timetable. Our goal is to recommend an allocation that funds each service board and gets each of them to a similar point in time to support their ongoing recovery. We continue to stay in communication with the service boards through this process, and we will come back to the board with a proposed allocation and a special board meeting the first week of November to discuss and act on those proposals prior to the FTA's deadline. We will be meeting actually with the service boards after this meeting today. And based on the principles we have laid out here with you and any additional discussion we have, we will discuss the allocation of the American Rescue Fund monies. We hope to achieve consensus and be able to present information back to the board at that early November meeting for your consideration. And also at that meeting, we will bring to you the proposed splits with Northeastern Indiana and Southwest Wisconsin as part, which is also part of the federal apportionment process. This early November meeting will follow all of the open meeting requirements. We should all remain mindful that this relief money, whether we allocate it fully now or as we sort of earlier contemplated over the coming years, which isn't the case now, is though going to run out. These monies will run out. And at that point, our regional system will likely confront the reality of insufficient revenue to sustain itself. It remains our goal to retain flexibility to achieve both sustainability and set up the 3 operators to have the greatest regional impact. I also want to reiterate that our strategic planning process remains the venue where we will seek and establish our long-term plan of action for funding sustainability as we do. And as we do so, we will continue to prioritize engagement and collaboration with our many stakeholders. I'll just pause here for if anybody has any comments or questions specifically on the rescue fund work that is underway and will continue.
Just one moment.
Sure.
I don't see any hands at this time.
Okay, no problem. I kind of, this is all happening a little faster timeline than we initially contemplated, and it is a change from where we were and how we were talking about this with you in previous months. So we will continue to keep you apprised, rest assured, and then look for the information about the upcoming meeting in early November. Nothing, Jeremy? Keep going?
No, still no hands.
Okay. I haven't warmed you up enough yet. Okay, no, let's keep going then. As a reminder, our next regular board meeting, would be is scheduled for Thursday, November 18. As is customary and part of our annual budget process, you will hear from the 3 service boards about the details of their operating and capital budgets. Additionally, as part of the budget process, we are developing our annual budget materials, as well as making presentations to the county boards throughout the region on the draft budget over the next couple of months. We have a comprehensive list of public hearings, regional meeting dates, and service board budget materials on our web, and we'll have them and the service board materials on our website as they become available. We will send out that link to you guys following this meeting, and also watch our regional transit update newsletter for other updates as they become available. So next slide, please. Thank you. So moving on to where we are in our strategic planning process, we are now 2 months into our initial engagement on the regional strategic plan, the goal of which is to focus both internally and externally on identifying and prioritizing issues the strategic plan needs to address. This effort will culminate in a publication this winter of the priority issues we have identified throughout this engagement effort, which will be also subject to public comment before it is provided for your consideration. Each month between now and when we bring the final strategic and financial plan to you, probably about this time next year, I expect to show you this timeline or some version of it and let you kind of know where we're at and what will be kind of happening in the coming months, weeks and months. Next slide, please. Since we last spoke, we have indeed begun making a plan, and our first step towards doing so has been to invite a wide swath of transit thinkers, experts, and those who we know are passionate about reimagining our region's mobility system to weigh in by writing guest posts published on Connections, the RTA's blog. And we've published half a dozen of these posts and have more on the way. And we're getting some very good feedback on that as well. I'm also pleased to announce our first public forum in this engagement effort to be hosted by the Urban Transportation Center at the University of Illinois, Chicago as part of their 2021 seminar series. The forum will be held on Thursday, November 11 from noon to 1, and will bring together some of the most informed and urgent voices in emerging transit issues for a wide-ranging discussion and question and answer session. Coinciding with this forum, we will also launch a public survey to garner feedback in areas we spoke to you about in August. Those include opportunities for impact, transit system adaptation, funding sustainability, and equity. And you probably recall last month we had Deborah Shaw and Tanya Adams speak to you about the importance of inclusive and meaningful engagement in the strategic planning process. We have taken their advice to heart in planning not just this initial engagement effort, but in developing an ongoing communication and engagement track for this strategic plan. And we look forward to laying that track out more comprehensively for you in the coming months. Today, we bring to you 2 additional guest speakers to address the critical topic of transit system adaptation. Our first speaker is Benji De La Peña, who was announced at the beginning of this year as the CEO of the Chicago-based Shared Use Mobility Center. Benji's experience includes serving as the first chief strategy and innovation at Seattle's Department of Transportation, and as the Director of Community and National Strategy at the Knight Foundation. You'll also hear from Jody Holton, Assistant General Manager of Planning at the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, or SEPTA, one of our peers. Prior to joining SEPTA, Jody was an Executive Director with the Montgomery County, Pennsylvania Planning Commission. Jody is going to discuss how SEPTA, which shares many similarities with the RTA, is currently reimagining its regional rail and bus service as prioritized during their strategic planning effort that they completed during the pandemic. So I am sure you, like me, are very eager to hear their thoughts. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will wrap up. Turn it back to you, but happy to answer any questions or hear from any board members.
Great. Thank you very much, Leanne. And I want to echo your congratulations to Dr. Sagar, who not only serves our region well, but has a role in agriculture in central Illinois with the Illinois State Fair, and has a very prominent role in community colleges in Illinois. So Dr. Sagar, most of our board members, you are an accomplished professional, and my hat's off to you, and congratulations on your well-deserved recognition. Any questions of Leanne before we move on to Benji?
There are no hands at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So under 6A on our topics today is our discussion of the next regional transit strategic plan, our continuing discussions. And we will, as Leanne has introduced them, first hear from Benji De La Pina. And Benji, if you're with us, it's all yours, the forum here. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chairman Dillard. Thank you, directors, for inviting me, and Executive Director Redden. Like I said, my name is Benjamin De La Pena. I'm the CEO of the Shared Use Mobility Center. I'm going to talk to you about information as infrastructure, and I have about 10 minutes to talk to you about it. If nothing else, if you remember nothing else about what I'm going to say, remember this. Information is becoming the infrastructure, or critical infrastructure of transportation, and we need to plan for it. And this is not about technology, it's not about gadgets, but about information itself. And so let me illustrate just 3 things that are happening now, have happened to us or to me, to show you how deeply embedded it is and how important it is. So I'm sure you've all ordered something online, maybe on Amazon. And as you're looking for it on their website, you can check how they will tell you how many of this product is still available. And then as you order, it'll tell you when it's going to be delivered, and then you're going to check how many days, when is it coming, and it'll tell you when it's been delivered with kind of a picture of when it gets to your mailbox or your doorstep, and it's confirmed. All of that information flows not just through one company, but multiple companies and multiple services, right? So there is a delivery system of information, not just the goods itself, but the information about what's available, what price is it, how much stock do you have, when is it getting to you. Let's jump a bit to about a week or so ago. Facebook went down, right? And for many of us, it was like minor inconvenience. You weren't on social media. Maybe that was a good thing. But for a service that actually serves close to 3 billion people in the world, it had really deep impacts on businesses. For a lot of services for a lot of groups in Latin America, WhatsApp, which is part of Facebook, went down, and they're more dependent on that than email or SMS. And so it stalled a lot of things, and no one has yet accounted for the actual cost of business. All of that for a tech company, one of the top 10 multi-billion-dollar company, right, failed because of one particular piece of technology they were using and how they were directing it all through their domain. So severe impact, right? Anthony Townsend, a friend who wrote the book Smart Cities and Ghost Road, is an expert on transportation and technology, likes to tell this apocryphal story about Waze, the navigation app in 2012. Waze back then was running off Amazon Web Services, and he says that in Israel, about 20% of the users, the road users, the drivers were using Waze, and apparently a tree or something or the other shut down a key data center for Amazon Web Services in Virginia, thereby shutting down Waze. And supposedly there was gridlock in Tel Aviv that day. What all of those stories tell you is how critical the flow of information is in the way we move goods and the way we move people. And so can you imagine, so I'm in shared use mobility, right? And we deal with the TNCs like Uber and Lyft and bike shares and everything else and car sharing. But can you imagine today's passenger mobility system running without this flow of information? When I first signed up for Zipcar, there were no smartphones yet. And you had to book things by phone or on the web or by SMS. Now you do everything by your phone. So all of that is about the flow of information across an information infrastructure of systems talking to other systems. So if information is infrastructure, and we can't imagine today's transportation system without that information, right? The question I always have is, what's the plan, right? We don't seem to be planning for information itself. Mostly the plans are, what's the service upgrade? When are we shifting to the next edition of Windows or Windows Server? When are we moving to the cloud? Or what's the next gadget or sensor we're going to buy? But we don't have a plan for what information do we need to put out there, and how does it need to flow so that users can, so we can make the system more accessible and usable and equitable for the people who use public transportation, right? When I was in Seattle DOT, we recognized that there was this emerging information infrastructure. And we developed the new mobility playbook. This was in 2017, before there were electric kick scooters. And the the frame of the new mobility playbook was, first we need to decide what kind of city do we want, and then technology adapts. Because in the last 100 years, we've done exactly the opposite when it comes to transportation. We chose one particular technology, a car, and then built out our cities to service that particular technology. And that's why we are in this mess now, both in terms of equity and climate, right? So from that, though, we understood that we needed to have a plan on information itself, and we have a draft plan. It remains a draft plan because there was change of leadership at the mayoral level, and the new mayor wasn't interested in it. But it was user-focused information needs, not technology needs, right? Who needs to know what, or which system needs to know what? As with any good plan, if you create a plan for information, it should be prioritized. It should prioritize what you're going to do, and it should be guided by values. And so we need to move from a focus on what is the storage and the processing to a focus on information flow. We did information flow mapping, and the kinds of cartwheels we had to do just to translate information from one system to the other, information that users needed, was astounding, and no one was tracking it. Why is this important? Information and structural racism are actually connected, well connected. So you all know about redlining. Redlining was primarily transmitted, although there's research now that maybe not totally that way, through the redlining maps, right? And it assumed the data was risky communities, which were communities that had people of color in them. So we wouldn't lend to them, right? That became the foundations for policy and markets and lending and everything else. That was propagated through information. Another thing in transportation, level of service, which I'm sure you also know about, right? Measuring just how fast cars are moving through an intersection. And we've designed our systems around that bit of information, and we collect a lot of it. And both those two systems actually interacted to running highways through communities of concern, and usually historically neglected communities. So again, I repeat, we need to have a plan for information as you're planning out the RTA's next 5-year plan. We have to ask the service boards, what is your plan for information? Not technology, information. To me, it should have 5 imperatives, right? It should accelerate the decarbonization of our transportation systems. It should advance equity, because historically we've done, as transportation systems and investments, we've done so much damage to particular groups and particular communities. It should protect privacy, because I remember a decade ago, the line was, data is the new oil. Or there was another one, Tim O'Reilly used to say, what's important is the data exhaust of what you could learn from the data you were gathering. And it's interesting that both oil and exhaust are existential threats now, the way we see it. And we see that with data in the wrong hands without ethical guidelines around it. The fourth imperative to me is that it should level the playing field, right? You don't want to wake up no one wants to wake up the next morning and your whole information system is handled by one company. Going back to the Facebook story, imagine if Facebook handled transportation and it goes down. Now, luckily it doesn't. but that tells you that we need to be planning about it. And lastly, cybersecurity, which nearly every government agency is concerned about now and should be concerned about because there's just so much cyber ransoming going on there and locking people out or locking data out. So last bits of advice. If information is infrastructure, what do we need to do? One, we need to start thinking of information beyond IT departments. Right? In one service board, one agency has a CIO, but that CIO frame is still the whole frame of delivery of IT services. And we need to think about the delivery of information. Now, government agencies are designed to gather information and analyze them. They're not designed to push out information in a flow and interaction way, the way we do with phones now and apps. We need to learn to manage information as an asset, not as a tool. What do I mean by that? When you have a tool, you keep one next to you wherever you need it. So you may have a wrench in the garage, a wrench near your car, a wrench at another toolbox. Can't do that with critical information because pretty soon, as we're learning in a lot of open data, right, is you don't know which data is now valid. And managing as an asset also means you need money to acquire and maintain that information. You need to understand the cost of replacing that information or losing that information, and you have a strategy for future growth. So I'll stop there and we can have some questions. Again, you take away nothing. Information is infrastructure. We need to have a plan for information, particularly for transportation.
Great. Thank you, Benji. That was awesome. By the way, you have one of the best LinkedIn pictures I've ever seen. So, are there questions of Benji? We've come a long way, Benji, by the way, from, I've watched our progression of information and as well as technology come a long way. But obviously, as you know, it moves at the speed of light. And it is just so critical to our riders and just the way Americans in general, especially transit riders, have come to expect. Are there questions or comments for Benji?
Mr. Chairman, I see no additional hands at this time.
Great. Well, thank you. We're on it. We know how to find you, Benji, and we so appreciate your input and speaking with us today. And I'm sure you've not heard the last of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
With that, thank you so much, Benji. Let's move on to Judy Holton. And Judy, are you? I'm trying to see on my little screen. Are you? There we go. You're here. It's all yours, Judy. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. And it's Jody Holton from SEPTA, from the Philadelphia region of Pennsylvania. And thank you for having me today. We're excited to talk about the strategic plan that we released back in February. This strategic plan was started in about February of 2020. And of course, we had to sit on that process for a little bit while we pivoted and responded to the pandemic. I'm sure you can all relate to the first few months of that pandemic being focused on recovery. When we did come to a more stable point in the pandemic in October of 2020, we launched the strategic plan effort again, and it's somewhat of a different process than we had envisioned when we started out. So next slide. Just to give you a sense of what type of transportation system we have in Philadelphia, we are the 5th largest mass transit system by ridership in the US. So we have a lot of similarities with Chicago and your transit service. We have served 1 million trips a day pre-COVID, and right now we're serving about 400,000 trips a day. We have 9,300 employees, making us one of the major employers in the Philadelphia region. Next slide. So this document, the strategic plan, has become more of a framework. It's a concise document that is focused on identifying the challenges to our region and disrupting our industry. We set a vision for where we want to be headed and a few goals and strategies to get us there. We sought public input, of course, as well as an extensive in-reach process. Next slide. So some of the industry trends that we were looking at right before the pandemic, were a lot of things actually that Benjamin was talking about. And I'm glad to follow along after his remarks, because a lot of that is covered here. It's about sharing information. How do we compete with other modes? How do we provide choice? We were seeing telecommuting and things of that nature happening pre-pandemic. We were seeing multiple modes being available, new mobility options, and digital technology was really propelling that shift. So in 2020, what's been accelerated, it seems, is that need for frequent and timely communication, that sharing of information across with our customers as well as our employees. We've had a lot of shift in mode share, and we need to recover that ridership and figure out ways to do so. The 9 to 5 commuting patterns are going to come back, but it is not going to be a growth segment of our commuting public and our transit system. So we continue to have acute funding challenges. Pre-pandemic, SEPTA was facing an incredible disparity of capital funding. And then adding on to that issue is the losing $1 million a day in fare revenue. So next slide. We also know that we need to be a different kind of agency in order to adapt to these changing dynamics. We can no longer rely on a hierarchical kind of top-down leadership structure as a lot of transit agencies are set up. We need to ensure that there's an open flow of communication amongst our divisions internally so that we can innovate and change more rapidly than we've been able to in the past. So we address and focus on culture in our strategic plan in a more meaningful way than I think we have in the past. Next slide. I mentioned the funding challenges. So our state capital funding sources, we received funds back in 2013, an additional funding about $100 and some million a year from the state. Those funds are not bondable. So we worked down our bridge and state of good repair kind of replacement projects, but not our vehicles. We were not able to bond against the funding that we received. So we have, as a result, one of the oldest rail fleets in the country. And that requires different types of capital funding. We also have a very low local funding contribution, which is different than Chicago's. Next slide. So a little bit on the in-reach process in our strategic plan. We were very successful in our recovery planning efforts right after the pandemic, responding very quickly to changes in information that was needed for our customers, focus on better ventilation and public safety concerns in our stations. So we've been able to respond to the recovery and the pandemic in a meaningful way. And a lot of that was due to having committees with leadership from across the agency. So no longer did you have to kind of go up the silo, down the silo, and across. We would have we had committees and teams set up that included someone from finance, IT, engineering, and so forth. And these teams were very productive. We kept that going through the strategic plan, and we also we conducted an organizational health index survey. I mentioned culture being very important. So how do our employees feel about coming to work? And as we've noticed the trend in the labor force, it's very hard right now to keep employees, to keep them motivated and excited about coming to work. So we've started this process to survey every year our organizational health and then focus on how we can respond to that. All the feedback that we received is put into the mission, values, vision, and goals. I mentioned the core teams and having our staff focused on each one of these goals and initiatives. We also recognized that we needed to start implementing the plan before we actually even adopted it. And we kicked off an efficiency and accountability initiative that was meant to guide changing some of our workflow processes to be more efficient, and then also look at every last dollar so that we are thinking of ways to adapt and innovate in this new reality. The plan was adopted, so next slide. And we have our mission. Okay, there it is. One of the things our employees feel very strongly about is our mission. We have mission-driven employees. And so we put that right up front in the plan. We know that we come to work to provide safe, reliable, accessible mobility choices for everyone. Next slide. The thing that we needed to go a little step further from just establishing the mission and establishing our core values as an agency and how our culture should work. So setting the organizational mindset, we call this our SEPTA spirit. Our employees might feel mission driven, but they don't always feel listened to. They don't always feel like their contributions are heard or their innovation and their ideas are received. And that's a problem if we want to change rapidly. Next slide. We set our vision, and it's very similar, to the vision that you might have in your planning efforts. We are at the core of a resilient, prosperous, and equitable community for all in the Philadelphia region. Next slide. These are the 3 goals. So in the next 5 years, this is what we need to be focused on. Establishing that proactive organization and also providing an intuitive experience for our customers. Easy to use for all. If we are going to shift from our major market segment being a 9-to-5 commuter, we're going to have to figure out how to be welcoming for all types of trips. And we're going to have to figure out how to encourage more tourism and visitor trips on our system. And that goes directly hand in hand with the 3rd goal, is delivering the seamless transit network. How can we get our different modes to work better together so that whether you're on regional rail, you're on our bus network, you're on our rail transit system, it is an agile and integrated system. We also need to be integrated with our other transportation providers. So no longer do we think of them as competition, we embrace co-opetition or different types of partnerships with those transit agency and integrating things like our fare system with others. Next slide. So we are focused on a lifestyle network is what we're calling it, more mobility options for all, that you can use transit for all different types of trips. And we will achieve this network by emphasizing those partnerships with other transportation providers, doing a deep dive into our fare policy. As we see ridership return, are there ways and past products that are more flexible than the ones that we've offered in the past? Can we partner with major employers and have institutional pass programs, which are something that we don't have at present in the same way that other you typically in the West Coast have those types of pass products. And we need to focus on mode master plans. So our bus network is getting a comprehensive redesign. Our rail transit network is looking at ways to make it more cohesive. I'll talk about that in a minute. And our regional rail network as well needs to be focused on how to integrate with the other provider or other services. So next slide. So the plan stops there. We stop at, we need to work on these different mode master plans. If you go to New York or you go to DC, you know exactly what the subway system is or the metro is. In Philadelphia, we have a very unique system where we have trolleys and subways and elevated system, but they're not all under the same umbrella for the customer. So in order to capture other types of people on our system, we need to focus on unifying that rail transit system. We did establish new key performance indicators in our strategic plan that are a little different. We shifted them because we need to be focused on capturing these additional trips in our network. And the key performance indicators, instead of just looking at bottom line ridership, we're looking at passenger revenue per vehicle hour. We're looking at pounds of CO2 per passenger mile traveled. Thinking of a couple other key performance indicators under that intuitive experience, goal 2, a customer engagement score. How often are we communicating with our customers and interacting with them? And under goal 3, looking at the equitable service provider, or how much service are we providing to essential workers, the population near transit stations, and then a new one that we've added is average transfer wait time. So how are we going to measure whether we've integrated our system better is how clean and how quickly those transfers can take place between different modes. And I know that I probably have run out of time. So the next few slides are about those different master plans that are going on. Bus revolution. Next slide. Our SEPTA Metro concept to link our different rail transit types and modes. And it's not just signage, it's really branding the entire system and making it easier to use. Next slide. Reimagining regional rail. Again, this is about how do we capture additional trips. We do have an excellent commuter rail, a regional rail system. We call it regional rail for a reason. It does have one of the longest spans of service throughout the day. We do have very frequent service in the off-peaks comparatively. But how do we continue to emphasize that and respond to ridership recovery? And this plan will focus on sort of the short-term schedule changes, the medium-term capital investments that are needed to make more frequent service throughout primarily our city, and then the longer-term investments in what might include extensions and so forth. So next slide. And I'll just touch on this one briefly. The zero emission bus fleet, we are developing a master plan for how we would convert to an all electric, battery electric bus system. Next slide. And we have some solutions related to raising funds for primarily our capital budget. Because for us, our local funding, you can say 2% of our capital budget. And one thing that you guys can feel great about is these numbers are a little old, but our capital budget tends to be about half of what other peer agencies are. And that's you in the second bar chart there with in 2018, I'm sure it's gone up since then, $1.1 billion in your capital budget compared to our $700 million. I'll just stop there in the interest of time, and if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you, Jody. That is very, very helpful. As I always say, all the legacy systems are in this together, and we learn from one another and, stay involved through APTA in the Chicago region with Leanne and Dorval Carter, the head of the Chicago Transit Authority, being very, very involved. Love your one lifestyle chart and network. That's good. It's very helpful. And on regional rail, one of the things I think we're going to find out nationwide, you're already on it in Philly, is we're going to have more commuters are ditching the regular rush hour. Maybe the evening rush, we're still all in, but I go in later. I don't get on that 7 a.m. train like I used to. I might take what I call the laggards train at 9:30 or 9:15, or even later. So more trains during the day on our regional rail. Are there questions, Jeremy, that you see or comments from any of the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Director Gorman has a raised hand.
Yes, Director Gorman.
Thank you, Chairman Dillard, and thank you, Jody, for the plan and sharing that with us as we, delve into our strategic plan. I too, my comments, I guess, would be that lifestyle that Chairman also commented. that was very catchy, and also towards the end when you mentioned about the zero emissions and how you're working with the electric vehicles and for the bus systems, and obviously that's a big play and something that everyone is really, looking to try to see how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And, that's one of my issues too, that, I look forward to working on, as well as renewables. I think somehow getting away or biodiesels, getting away from, fossil fuels as much as we can to incorporate maybe renewable gas and fuels, as opposed to jumping right into electric vehicles, but it is a good long-term, vision. So we thank you for that.
Thanks for those comments. I think, yeah, we've learned. We did buy some battery electric buses, 20 of them, and one of the things we learned was that there's a fair amount of space and needs in terms of charging infrastructure. So that's one reason why we decided let's take a look at what it would take to change over the entire fleet, and let's really put out a plan to address that systematically. And we also were lucky in the last couple years, we were able to find a financially kind of neutral, budget neutral way to build 2 solar farms out in the more rural counties of Pennsylvania. And those solar farms, when the second one is brought online, will supply 20% of our electric demand. So given that we have an all-electric rail fleet, that's a big deal for us. But the timing had to be right for that kind of investment to be budget neutral for us. So it's a
No,
good.
that's great. No, that's great. Budget neutral is always a beautiful thing. So we thank you for that.
Chairman, I don't have my hand raising function. May I speak?
Please.
Thank you. Jody,
Michael.
thank you so much for the information. This is Michael Lewis. I wanted to ask a question about the key performance indicators, the KPIs. As we transition from the historic legacy systems to this new demand model, did you come up with the KPIs first, or did you wait to see what was unfolding and then design the KPIs around that? I'm just very curious as to the thinking that went into the creation of the key performance indicators.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because when we were developing the strategic plan goals and the initiatives that are under each one of those goals, so there's another whole list of things, initiatives that we're working on. We were, in the midst of having the worst ridership that we've ever had. And a lot of our performance indicators had been tied to ridership and sort of normalized by ridership. And so as we were developing these strategies and initiatives, we came up with things that we thought were important to measure. So at the time, we knew that we wanted to measure equity, and we wanted to and that was a broad thing that we wanted to measure. So some of our key performance indicators didn't necessarily have the metrics or the data behind them yet. We kind of set them out as this is what we want to measure, and we're going to find the best available data to do so. So we're just now about to release our first round of key performance indicators that have been measured. So it is kind of a work in progress. So I'd say we have about half of them up and running and ready to be released. And then there's another portion of them that we are still trying to collect the right data for and determine the right mechanisms. So the customer engagement score, that's one that we have to further develop and think about. Is it a combination of customer inquiries, public meetings? How do we truly measure that every year over year? So it's been kind of a dynamic process. And we did keep some of the original KPIs from our original strategic plan, or our prior strategic plan, like operating expense per passenger trip. That's one that we had tracked prior to this. But we had to move away from just ridership being a metric.
Jody, last question on that. Did you, in your performance indicators, look at where demand's greatest and where service lies as a KPI? Because you kind of alluded to that, like if there's a heat map where, say, essential workers are in one area and transportation is in a different one, is that a KPI that you've looked at or thought about?
Yeah, so we've been using in the interim, we have something called the customer effort score. So transit can be difficult to use, and customers will turn to other options. So I think that one of the things that score has in it is the transit center has a score for, or they already have a metric set up for how easy it is to use transit as compared to other modes. So we're kind of using their metrics for that. The transit center in New York City puts that out online. And so we're using that metric. And then we're looking at population near transit. That's something that we haven't necessarily tracked, but to see how our communities are growing near transit. We have equitable service. So we're working with our MPO, DVRPC. They have areas of disadvantage and a score for that as well, with transit access to disadvantaged communities is what they call it. So we've been kind of working with some of the scores that our regional planning commission has set up.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, anyone else wishing to speak or ask questions?
I see no additional hands at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Jody, I have one other question. Do you have any CNG buses, or are you basically all electric?
Oh, we do not have any CNG buses. Right now we have hybrid diesel electric buses. We actually have some trolley buses or electric pantograph buses left, but that's kind of an anomaly, a legacy of our system. We have not gone with CNG at this point. I think our next move for battery electric buses, we've learned that some of the range issues that we might have on our suburban routes, we might look towards the hydrogen fuel cell technology. But at this time, primarily we're looking at that battery electric bus. It just fits our needs better and in the city and with our emissions goals.
And you face the same weather issues we have here in Chicago. So
yes.
Not necessarily San Diego.
Yeah, they're not getting any better.
So,
Mr. Chairman, Director Sagar has
yes,
a raised hand.
Yes, Dr. Sagar.
Yeah, I appreciate very much, Jody, the presentation, and I commend you all on the process and the product. I think is very, very impressive. So thank you so much for this opportunity today. One of the things that is so difficult, I think, for any board, any agency, as we look to the planning function and we look to the future, is to try to predict growth capacity within larger areas, especially as we look at a transit system that is hubbed, if you will, into a central metropolitan area, but extends outward into the broader region. And each of those regions, through their own jurisdictional control, are considering how their communities, how their regions, how their areas are actually going to be growing, and what are the opportunities for that. And so one of the things that I appreciate in terms of your approach as described is the fact that you are considering all kinds of things including the dynamic and the consideration of the population and the description of that population and what that population is doing in terms of its diversification at all. But how did you capture that potential growth, those people who are not yet there, and yet who are having to be served or will be served in the future in those development areas that don't exist yet, and yet also will have to be served, and we need to capture that in somehow way, shape, or form. So what was the process in looking at that?
So for longer term community growth, whether it's population and employment, we still rely on our regional planning commission for their population and employment forecasts that are then funneled into their travel demand model. And then we forecast out in, say, the year 2040, 2050 for what transportation options are needed in those growth areas. One of the things that we'll be doing through these 3 separate planning efforts is looking at that population and employment growth, and how we might be able to better serve and align for future service to those areas. We have a few capacity expansion projects. So an extension of one of our rail transit lines out to King of Prussia, which is our 3rd largest employment center. That still remains an important project for us. So we could have opened that project yesterday and it would have been successful in terms of ridership by the metrics that, most new capacity projects are judged by. So there's a lot of pent up demand in our region. And that project's kind of an illustration of that. I think that, we're also looking at those vehicle fleet replacements. And before we had a lot of emphasis on that commuter type service. So maybe we needed longer trains with more capacity to provide that limited and express service. And so in the regional rail master plan, we'll be looking at what types of vehicles are actually needed for the longer term. Do we need vehicles that are more a better acceleration rate so that we can serve more local service better? I hope I'm getting at your question, but in the bus revolution and in the which our comprehensive bus network redesign and our regional rail planning effort, we will be looking at those longer term growth projections and how to serve all parts of the region as it continues to grow.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, and I know that it's a tough question to really respond to, but I think that we have a tendency to look at growth projections and how we're going to respond to growth projections. But we rarely look at, in our planning processes, of growing demand. I mean, I think that there are ways that we can and should be addressing to grow that demand ourselves. Instead of just responding to it, we need to be able to look to growing that demand, especially as we look at the transit systems of the future. So just my commentary, and I'll get off that soapbox on that. But I do appreciate your response. And again, I appreciate so much your presentation today.
Now, that's a great point. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. Jeremy, anything else?
No additional hands, Mr. Chairman.
Jody, we can't thank you enough. We're all in this together, and you're very helpful. And please continue, as you always do, to work with Leanne and our staff here in Chicago. And any way we can help you, we're always available. So thanks for joining us, giving us your time and your great professional input today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks, Jody. All right. Leanne, anything else on this particular topic before we go on to B's monthly financial results?
I think it can officially move into the rest of the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, and thanks for setting that up. They were both great. Let's go on to 6B, which is our presentation of the report on the monthly financials through August. B, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Directors. This is B. Raina Hickey, the Chief Financial Officer. Today, I will cover the year-to-date Service Board financial results through August. This item is for your information only. No vote will be necessary. Next slide, please. So system ridership in August was about 45% of 2019 levels, unchanged from July. CTA had the highest August ridership at 48% of 2019, followed by PACE at 44% and Metra at 24%. ADA paratransit ridership has recovered to about 70% of pre-COVID levels. Next month, it will be interesting to see how closely the September ridership results follow the rising DASH budget line, which anticipates steadily increasing commuting and the start of the new school year. Next slide, please. Indications are that July sales tax receipts will be somewhat lower than the record level we saw in June, but will still far surpass the adopted budget. Today, public funding through August produced a favorable variance of $84.5 million, or 8%. The 6.9% unfavorable variance for ADA paratransit is due to slower than anticipated CRISA funding drawdowns, but those are expected to catch up to the budget as we move forward. Next slide, please. So looking at system-wide operating expenses through August, they were $82.5 million, or 4.3% favorable to the revised budget and highlighted in light blue, with each service board reporting favorable expense variances. Metro and PACE expenses are going to increase somewhat as ongoing service restorations are implemented, but both are projected to remain favorable to budget. ADA paratransit expenses are also under budget, but recovering ridership is expected to increase ADA costs in future months. Next slide, please. The surging sales tax and good expense performance we showed on the previous two slides continue to limit the amount of federal funding relief we can requisition for operations. While this is generally a good thing, lower than expected relief funding requisitions have now reduced operating revenue almost $195 million, unfavorable to budget, as shown by all the red in this table. This in turn is continuing to impact recovery ratios, which I will discuss next. Next slide, please. As we have been predicting over the last several months, the regional recovery ratio has now dropped below 50% for the year, solely due to the slower than anticipated relief funding drawdowns I mentioned. Through August, the regional recovery ratio of 45.7% was 8.2 points unfavorable to budget, highlighted in red. In addition, each mainline service board recovery ratio is now significantly unfavorable to budget. If sales tax continues to overperform, which we do expect, the region is headed for a sub 50% finish, as Doug mentioned last month. I can report this month that RTA has initiated the process to request legislative relief from the 50% recovery ratio requirement while the region is in this unusual circumstance of high sales tax receipts and relatively low fare revenue. You may remember that in 2020, the recovery ratio was also in jeopardy of finishing below 50%, but sales tax performance was not as strong last year, enabling the service board's final true-up care requisitions to produce a year-end recovery ratio of 51.9%. Next slide, please. In closing, here is a quick update on the status of CARES Act funding. The total drawdown increased from last month's report, with the region now standing at 76% of CARES Act funding utilized. Of the service board, CTA has drawn the most relief funding at 91.3% of their apportionment. In addition to CARES, PACE and Metro have drawn down about $14 million of CRISA funding, less than 3% of the region's apportionment. That concludes my remarks. I'll try my best to answer any questions. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, B. Are there questions of our Chief Financial Officer?
One moment, Mr. Chairman. We have, I believe, leftover hands raised. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Melvin's got a question.
Director Melvin, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Director Melvin.
Great. Great report. Be very, very interesting. Can you give us some sort of indication of how you're thinking about dealing with the recovery ratio and what that whole exemption might look like and how long it might be for? Is there anything available on that?
So we are working obviously with legislative bodies to look at a recovery ratio over a period, recovery ratio relief over a period of a few years, right? Because this isn't a one-year problem. It's probably not a 2-year or even a 3-year problem. It is getting back in some type of a prorated way to a recovery ratio over a period of time. So it might be a graduated program, it might be a sunset type program relief, but we know that this is something we're going to need for a period of time. And again, you know, it's happening because it's a math problem. The reality is that sales tax is coming in higher than we expected, which is a good thing. We would not wish that to be differently. Service board's expenses have been significantly reduced, and again, that's being responsible. So it's happening for a good reason, and I don't think the formulators of the recovery ratio many years ago envisioned that problem. So the legislators do understand what we're facing, and we don't anticipate any problems in obtaining that relief. But again, it's got to be for a period of time, and we don't look at it as a forever kind of.
If additionally, Mr. Chairman, if I can just jump in too. I mean, we're kind of looking at this in a two-step process. The first step is what's currently being discussed with the legislature right now, and as I mentioned, is being considered for even potentially in this current short and tight veto session. So we're sort of hopeful, but we have other options for even the spring session. But the current proposal for consideration is to look for a 3-year waiver on the recovery ratio as giving to get us through this sort of uncertainty and period of time, and then allowing us the additional time and space to continue that conversation with our legislative leaders and with the service boards about what does the future look like. Does this need to be permanent? Does this need to be adjusted, etc. But the current legislation under consideration is a 3-year waiver.
Great, thank you. No, it sounds really, really interesting. I like your approach, and it's a tough problem because it's so unpredictable and so many unknowns. But thank you both very much.
Thanks, Director Melvin. You haven't seen the last of this as our Finance Committee Chair. All right. Shall we move on to item 7A, which is an ordinance. Thank you, B, very much, by the way. Item 7A is an ordinance formalizing the post-bond issuance compliant policy, and our General Counsel, Nadine Lacombe, you want to brief us on this one, please?
I believe you're on mute, Nadine.
Thank you, Jeremy. I said good morning to everyone once again. Hopefully this is going to be a relatively perfunctory matter. As you know, with the board's approval, the RTA has the authority to issue tax-exempt bonds. The tax-exempt nature of those bonds is an integral part of the agreement between RTA and its bondholders. The bondholders expect us to have procedures in place to protect their investment. The draft policy before you formalizes what we and the service boards do to maintain the tax-exempt nature of the bonds, which protects bondholders and the region's financial interests. As you can imagine, there are many IRS regulations regarding government issued tax-exempt bonds. The policy that we ask you to adopt was drafted in conjunction with our outside bond counsel, specifically to address those IRS requirements. 100% of RTA bond funds are expended by the service boards on capital projects. The measures in the policy address what we do to monitor the use of those funds. While not required by law, we're advised by our bond counsel that it's a best practice to have the governing body approve the policy, which is why we are presenting this item today. The policy appoints a compliance officer and outlines the roles and responsibility of that officer, which will be B, other RTA divisions, and the service boards. As I mentioned, our CFO, B. Raina Hickey, or her designee will act as the compliance officer on the various matters that are required by the policy. The service boards are aware of these requirements that are set forth in the grant agreements between each of them and the RTA. And we've also conducted training for RTA and service board staff on these requirements. The ordinance before you provides us with some flexibility in terms of making changes to the policy to remain compliant with changes in the law and best practices. Those changes will be reported to the board within 30 days so that you have the opportunity to request additional transparency should you deem it necessary. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, as is B. Raina Hickey. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadine. Are there questions on this? This is an ordinance, so it's going to take a motion in a second.
See no raised hands at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
Then how about a motion in a second to approve this ordinance?
A motion by Director Gorman and a second by Director Holt.
Thank you, too. On that, Mr. Secretary, please take the roll.
Director Indalcio.
Aye.
Director Canty.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gavin.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Cotel.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Melvin.
Yes.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Ross. Director Sager.
Yes.
Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
15 ayes, 1 absent, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And the ordinance is approved, Nadine, and for the record. Item 7B is an ordinance authorizing contracts for multi-year health and welfare benefits. And Allison, our other wonderful legal counsel, I think this one's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'm Allison Novak, and I am the Director of Human Resources and the Ethics Officer. We're here today to seek the board's approval of our recommendation to authorize the Executive Director to negotiate and execute agreements for the 2022 medical and dental insurance and thereafter until the end of 2027. To procure an affordable benefits package for the RTA employees, we engaged the services of an insurance broker, Alliant Employee Benefits, formerly known as Mesero Financial Services. Alliant goes to market on our behalf to secure the best benefit options. We are about to begin our open enrollment period for health benefits. Our current medical and dental insurance will expire on December 31st, 2021. We're in the midst of negotiating rates for the insurance and expect to have an agreement shortly. We do not anticipate that the premiums will be more than 10% higher than last year's premiums. We're requesting the board authorize the executive director to negotiate the medical and dental benefits for the next 5 years with a caveat that the premiums do not increase more than 10% each year from the prior year's premiums. If the premiums increase more than 10%, we would return to the board to seek approval. The 2022 proposed RTA budget contains sufficient funds for these estimated benefits. This concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you, and thanks for stepping up and taking over additional duties at the RTA as well. Are there questions or comments from anyone on the board?
Mr. Chairman, Director Gorman has a raised hand. I believe it might be from a previous item.
Yeah, sorry, previous.
Great, thank you.
There are no
There's
additional hands at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Great. So if there are no further questions or comments, can we have a motion and a second to approve this item as submitted, please?
A motion by Director Sager and a second by Director Carey.
Thank you. And with that, Mr. Secretary, please take a roll call.
Director Indelcio,
Aye.
Director Canty,
Aye.
Director Carey,
Aye.
Director Colson,
Yes.
Director Fuentes,
Aye.
Director Gavin,
Aye.
Director Gorman,
Aye.
Director Groven,
Aye.
Director Holt,
Aye.
Director Cotel,
Aye.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Melvin,
Yes.
Director Pang,
Yes.
Director Ross, Director Sager,
Yes.
Chairman Dillard.
Aye.
15 ayes, 1 absent, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and that is approved. Appreciate it. Thank you, Allison, very much. Item 7C is an ordinance authorizing the reappointment of Frank Paul as an RTA pension trustee. And Bill Lackman, you want to say anything on this, please?
Very briefly, good morning, Mr. Chairman and RTA directors. This is Bill Lackman in my role as Chair of the Board of Trustees of the RTA Pension Plan. Before you is a request to reappoint Frank Paul as a non-employee member of the RTA Pension Board of Trustees. The meeting packet contained an outline of Mr. Paul's professional background, including over 30 years of experience as a public finance investment banker. He is currently a Senior Vice President at Multibank Securities, a certified service-disabled, veteran-owned fixed income securities broker-dealer. Again, we are seeking the board's reappointment of Mr. Paul to the RTA Pension Board of Trustees. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Frank has been with us and representing us for a number of years, and aside from being an investment professional, I like the fact that he works for a military or veteran-owned operation. Director Friga is no longer with us, but John would like that as well. Any questions or about Mr. Paul? If not, can I have a motion? Yes. I have a motion in a second.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary, I cut you off.
I was just saying no raised hands, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. I need to follow our own rules and give us a little time between speaking. With that, how about a motion in a second to approve Mr. Paul?
Got a motion by Director Fuentes, second by Director Indelcio.
Thank you. And with that, Jeremy, please take a roll call.
Sure. Director Indelcio.
Aye.
Director Canty.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gavin.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Cotel.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Melvin.
Yes.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Ross. Director Sager.
Yes.
Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
15 ayes, 1 absent, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Mr. Paul is approved. And thank you, Bill. And thank you, Mr. Paul. Item 7D is a resolution. It's hard to believe it will be 2022, but setting the 2022 RTA meeting schedule. Any questions on this? It's pretty. We're pretty set in when we have our meetings. If there's no questions or comments, let's have a roll or a motion in a second and a roll call on this one, please.
Got a motion by Director Cotel and a second by Director Groven.
Thank you. Can you take the roll, please,
Sure.
Mr. Secretary?
Director Indelcio.
Aye.
Director Canty.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gavin.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Cotel.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Melvin,
Yes.
Director Peng,
Yes.
Director Ross, Director Sager, Director
Yes.
Sager, and Chairman Dillard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Our meeting dates are approved for next year. Item 7E, it's a bit of good news, is a resolution commending the CTA on an APTA award. And with that, Mr. Secretary, you want to read the resolution and then we will adopt it.
Sure. Whereas the American Public Transportation Association, APTA, annually recognizes one transit agency in North America with its Outstanding Public Transportation System Award. Whereas APTA has announced that the Chicago Transit Authority, CTA, will be the recipient of the award in 2021. Whereas in designating the CTA as the recipient of APTA's highest honor, APTA stated that few transit agencies in the United States have made more progress in modernizing their system over the past several years than the Chicago Transit Authority. Whereas, in addition to honoring the CTA, APTA named CTA President Dorval Carter Jr. as a recipient of the Outstanding Public Transportation Manager of the Year Award. Whereas, in recognizing President Carter, APTA stated that Dorval Carter Jr. has established himself as a respected leader and trailblazer in the public transportation industry and has overseen a record level investment in modernization, while ensuring the CTA investments directly boost the communities in which they are made. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority hereby honors the CTA and President Dorval Carter Jr. for this outstanding recognition and achievement.
Thank you. I always believe that the CTA every year is the number one operator in the country. I certainly also believe that Dorval Carter is the best operator in the United States of America. But what makes this award even more special is that it came during the pandemic. And if there was ever a more difficult year to operate a mass transit system, I don't know what it would have been. So my hat is off, as it is every day, to the CTA, their great management, but just their everyday employees who are frontline workers during one of the most difficult years in world history. And I so congratulate the CTA and Dorval on its well-deserved award. Any other comments by any of the board members? Otherwise, we'll take a motion in a second.
Mr. Chairman, Director Melvin has a comment.
Yes, Chris.
I'd like to echo what you said, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the award's given annually, but last year was quite a year. What's even more impressive about this, I think, is that, for the first time in 38 years of giving these honors, this is the first time that APTA has given the two top honors simultaneously to the same transit system, and that speaks volumes. It's kind of a human trait to think that things that are commonplace to you are ordinary, but we're reminded on days like today with, Mayor Sager's award and Dorval Carter's award that we're pretty lucky in Northeastern Illinois. The APTA Outstanding Public Transportation System Award recognizes Dorval Carter's leadership and his team's hard work for years. The Manager Award was given to Dorval Carter because he boldly stayed on the front lines during the most difficult time in our nation's recent history. He had the CTA run on a full schedule, thereby becoming the only major U.S. mass transit agency to run its system on a full schedule. And in running CTA on a full schedule, the CTA embodied the values that we here at RTA have all embraced: equity, inclusion, providing for the most vulnerable, and delivering essential travel. So, it's a privilege to be able to congratulate all of them for Dorval for his leadership and CTA for their leadership and hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Anyone else? I'd be remiss too if I didn't thank the mayor and the governor for signing the capital bill and the state legislature for providing us the needed capital relief. And as one of the things that APTA, as Leanne will tell you, stated is they believe that Chicago handled the COVID crisis better or as well as any mass transit agency in the United States. So, it's a multi-year award. It just didn't come from everything in 2021, although that was a major part of it. It's just a constant year in and year out excellent operation that the CTA runs under the most difficult circumstances. Nothing is ever perfect because we don't have the necessary funding we always need. But no one has weathered this award better than the CTA. And again, I thank them and their regular frontline workers day in and day out. So thank you to our elected officials and everyone at the CTA. How about a motion? Director Pang, you want to make the motion, and
Yes, please. That was beautiful.
if your other city appointees second it?
Second by Director Melvin, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you all. With that, why don't you take our joyous roll call, Jeremy?
Sure. Director Indelcio.
Aye.
Director Canty.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gadding.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Cotel.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Melvin.
Yes.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Ross. Director Sager.
Yes.
Chairman Dillard.
An enthusiastic yes. And again, congratulations to Dorval, Carter, and the CTA. And that roll call is adopted. And item 8 is new business. Any new business to be raised today?
Mr. Chairman, we did not handle item number 7.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Travel reimbursements. It's a normal one on our schedule at the end. So item 7F, one more approval item, and that's the travel reimbursements as they're submitted in your packet. If I could have a motion and a second on that, I'd appreciate it.
Motion by Director Indelcio, second by Director Sager.
Thank you. You want to take a roll call on that, Mr.
Yes.
Secretary?
Director Indelcio.
Aye.
Director Canty.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gadding.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Cotel.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Melvin.
Yes.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Ross. Director Sager.
Yes.
Chairman Dillard.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I skipped over that. Thanks for picking that out. Just excited to get on to the executive session of the deans. Item 8 is new business. Any new business to come before us?
None at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. So we'll go on to item 9, and that's executive session. And our general counsel, Nadine Lacombe, will you please provide us with the justification for adjourning into executive session?
Yes, Chairman, I'm happy to hear that you're excited to join this conversation.
Always.
Pursuant to subsection 2C29 of the Open Meetings Act, if the board would vote to adjourn from executive session, we could then proceed to the closed portion of the meeting.
Thank you. So before we do that, as a reminder, our next board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 18th at 9 o'clock in the morning. And as Leanne mentioned earlier, we will be sending out notice and scheduling an additional board meeting for the week of November 1st to address outstanding issues surrounding the allocation of the American Rescue Plan funding. So watch out for that. You'll see notices probably from Mr. LaMarche to schedule that. If there's no further business to come before the public session of the Board of Directors, I will entertain an actual motion and second to adjourn and move into executive session. So can I have that motion, please?
Motion by Director Canty and a second by Director Groven.
Great, thank you. With that, Jeremy, go ahead and take a roll call on that, please.
Sure. Director Indelcio.
Aye.
Director Canty,
Aye.
Director Carey,
Aye.
Director Colson,
Aye.
Director Fuentes,
Aye.
Director Gavin,
Aye.
Director Gorman. Sorry, Director Gorman,
Aye.
Director Groven,
Aye.
Director Holt,
Aye.
Director Cotel,
Aye.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Melvin,
Yes.
Director Pang,
Yes.
Director Sager, Director
Yes.
Sager, Chairman Dillard.
Yes, so before I officially adjourn us, Nadine, you want to remind us how we do technologically get into our executive session?
Yes, I'm going to suggest that we take 5 minutes to allow everyone to move from this platform to the other platform that we're using for that meeting, which is Teams. So you can completely log out of this meeting, and then you were sent a separate invitation, which should be on your calendars, for the executive session meeting, which is to be held on Microsoft Teams. If you do not have that invitation, just shoot me an email and I'll send you a link.
Great, thank you, Madam Council. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in executive session.